We're hope you guys are doing good. Today, Thursday, we're gonna go ahead and start talking about boundaries, healthy decisions, and all that good stuff. And we also have Aaron, our guest for today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here. So here we
And
are.
also me and my lovely wife Karen. I'm Izzy.
And I'm Karen. And this is the platform, My Family, where we talk about those tough little kinks that we all have in each other's families. Today, we're talking about boundaries. So, the first thing I think when I think of boundaries is my recovery. Um, in my recovery, I know when I was in active addiction, I had no boundaries. I didn't think of anything. I didn't think of ways to help myself. I didn't think of ways to keep people out except shunning and ignoring. And obviously, that's not the correct way because when I actually got into active recovery, I learned, those boundaries that you need to have to maintain that sobriety. Um, so I definitely considered myself, that rigid boundary where, I avoided intimacy with my family. I didn't ask for help. I had few close relationships except the people that actually knew I was in active addiction. I was very protective of my personal information. I'm not gonna, lie and say that I wasn't, an in the closet alcoholic or that, I didn't choose to, partake in these things. Um, and I detached. I detached from the world. And these things, aided in, me not being able to recover. Um,
Yeah.
so learning
No,
those healthy boundaries.
yeah, for me, not having boundaries with people really kind of led me farther into my unwellness. So, for me personally, I experimented and I was having fun, but I was letting people into my life that had no intention of bringing me any good or any security. So there I was, unwell and in active use and letting people into my life that were just bringing me down further and not being able to stand up for myself and be in better situations. And that really brought me further down to my rock bottom until now when I get it. And now that I'm in recovery, boundaries is my favorite word. I like my boundaries. And it took me a long time of finding the way to put those into place and to find my own voice again, and be able to stand up for myself and know that these situations or these relationships or the things that I was doing, were not benefiting me in any way. And so that was really challenging for me. But I know now I'm like, you get a boundary, you get a boundary, you get a boundary. Everybody's getting boundaries because I want to protect myself now. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy how people, in or even not in active uh recovery don't really understand or realize boundaries. Because
Right.
until I got the knowledge, I didn't know what boundaries were. It was pretty much me pushing my own boundaries, especially in active addiction, pushing my boundaries past that boiling point,
Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
that's when all the bad stuff starts to happen. Um, and also another thing that Karen said that kind of resonates was that self isolation piece because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know or have the knowledge on boundaries, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that everybody should honestly know. It's like in the back of your mind, you know you have boundaries, but do you express them? Do you show them? Do you tell people about your boundaries? That's another thing that resonates a lot with me. I didn't,
Yeah.
I really didn't know the boundary piece. And once I started practicing, and it takes a while, like you said, it takes a while to
Mm-hmm.
find that niche, that how can I say, that practice. It's practice, and practice makes perfect, you know.
Yeah.
And definitely now that I've understood my boundaries now, like you said, everybody gets a boundary. Everyone,
Yeah.
it's like a free coupon.
Passing them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Free boundaries for everybody.
Special. You get a boundary. You get a
Yeah.
boundary. The whole audience gets a boundary.
Yes.
And-
for-
Exactly. And the thing with me that I think, also aided in my recovery is, when I was in that active addiction without my boundary, I was always looking to avoid rejection, always avoiding, that being placed with that stereotype, like, oh, she's a drunk, or she's this, or she's this. And that really, kept me from wanting to maintain boundaries with people. It's just, there wasn't boundaries.
Yeah. You just feel really small and just,
Exactly.
yeah. Mhm.
But, recovery is a magical thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I know we're all a testament to recovery warriors because of, our hard fundamental pacts we put on ourselves and the boundaries we, put in play to remain sober. And, we protect these boundaries now.
Yeah.
So
I kind of look at it like a bubble. Honestly, it's like my
Yeah.
I'm a bubble boy.
Yeah.
And in my bubble, it's all positive. It's all great. Any drama stays out my bubble, and that's my boundary. I just want to live a healthy, recovery positive life. To be honest with you, I mean, any negativity, that's my boundary.
Exactly.
Negativity has to fly out the door. It's just no point of me sitting there and trying to make other people happy when I'm not happy myself. And that's kind of like what I've heard about somebody kind of taking your voice as far as the boundaries go. Especially when you're in active addiction, it's something that if you haven't gone through it, you're not gonna know.
Yeah.
But then you get the judgments, and you get the people with their opinions, and you get all those negative aspects of you trying to build up for those boundaries and those limits. And that's, I mean, I'm literally saying, like, what, it's been 2.5, 3 years almost, and I'm still building boundaries every day.
Right.
Because I feel like that leads into, the kind of the porous type boundaries where, there's a fine line where, we got black and white, but then there's that gray we need to be in.
Yeah.
And, you go from you're rigid on one end, and then your healthy's over here, but then in the middle you have that porous, where I probably said that a little wrong. Your porous is on this end, and your rigid's on this end. Your healthy is what you need to be at.
Yeah.
But, when you overtake your boundaries and don't realize what you're going for, you overshare. You have difficulty saying no to people. You over-involve other people's problems and kind of, fluctuate them to make them your own, and then you become dependent on other people's opinions when those don't really matter. The only thing that matters is you, how you feel, and your self-care.
Right, for sure. And I wrote a couple things down that when I think of boundaries, and when I think about when I was creating boundaries, some of the things that I had to really remind myself is that I am not a bad person for calling out toxic behavior. If there's somebody or a situation in my life that I know this behavior is toxic to me and to my recovery or to my relationship or to me as a mother, it's okay for me to call that out and say, no, this is where this stops. This is not good for me. It's not healthy for me. Because everything that we do should be out of love and not obligations. We're not obligated to do things for people. We should be doing them from the heart. And for me personally, in my unwellness, I was doing everything for everybody else and nothing for myself. So here I was out there in the world, in relationships, feeling like I was obligated to do things and not knowing when I could say, no, this is not good for me. This is not okay for me. And this is where it needs to really stop. And not allowing anyone to talk to you disrespectfully just because they're family. That was a huge thing for me too. Speaking of my family, knowing that, respect is a mutual thing. I'm actually respecting you by telling you this is not okay for me. This is where we need to put a boundary in place. And I, in turn, expect that person to respect my boundaries. Whereas in a previous life, I would have been like, oh, you crossed the line. All right, I'll give you another chance. Or, okay, maybe we can try this differently. And then here I was like getting smaller and smaller and smaller and overpowered by people that had no intention of adding anything good to my life. So yeah, it's like boundaries are good because it's all about healing and like reclaiming ourselves. Exactly. Getting in touch with who we are and knowing what we want for ourselves, for our family, for our relationships, and just for our life.
So kind of in the beginning, since we're working on the recovery aspect, before we could actually even, commingle that into, a family unit, what are the benefits you have gained from using boundaries with your addiction? Like, what are things that you use now to maintain that recovery?
Yeah, so it's ever changing for me because there used to be a point in time where like my number one boundary was people, places, and things. So I would go around certain people, I wouldn't go to certain places, and I wouldn't do certain things because I didn't want it to compromise my recovery. And that was a good, healthy boundary for me. Like I could have conversations with people on the phone, or like old friends or whatever, but actually being and hanging out and spending time and giving effort and energy to certain things that I knew could compromise recovery, I knocked that out of the park. But now, like as a peer support, it's different because now I get to really walk with some of the people that I'm supporting that might still be in active use, that might still have some toxic habits or things like that. And so, yeah, it kind of like really changes for me. But now with recovery, you learn more about yourself and you become more confident in yourself. And so I know now that I can kind of, how do I say this? I can kind of put myself into more situations and be around certain things that I might not have been able to before, and still know that that's not the life that I want, but I can be of service and of help to somebody who might not understand that yet, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm doing. But like in one situation where boundaries is like super important to me is with the father of my children. So I have two beautiful children, but they were born amid a domestic violence or abusive relationship with their father. And so I had to make a decision early on, actually, while he was incarcerated for the abuse, what I was going to do, what my boundaries were going to be as far as us co-parenting, or if that was even a thing, or how that was going to go. And I made the decision that, that he is still the father of my children and that he is still going to be in their life. And I needed to obviously heal from the pain that had been caused, but I also knew that I needed to have boundaries in place because we were not going to go back there. We were going to walk away from that, and we were going to leave it where it was. And that worked for me. Took some time, and we still have little kinks here and there, but I know when to say no. I know when I can say no, like this is not comfortable for me, or this is not correct for our children, or you know what I mean? Just things like that where I can stand up for myself and for the benefit of my children, and know that like I don't have to go back into that cycle of abuse or into that relationship again and still mingle. And that would not be possible without boundaries. It really wouldn't, because I think it was a little bit harder for him to walk away from that relationship. And this was like 6 years ago, and we're still going through this. And so there are times where it's like, oh, we need to be together as a family. And I have to say, wow, as great as that sounds, to raise our children together, to be, as one, it can't work, can't happen. And so I have to protect myself and know that I don't want to go back there again.
True. And I think that's where I think communication and boundaries go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to have to be vocal, verbal, sometimes even physical, but there's also that physicality that's positive physicality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And where that boundary can be communicated. Without communication, there's really no boundary, because you're not saying either party. It could be either party. If the communication is not there, the boundary can't be built.
Right.
And
right.
It's also cohesive. It's got to be both parties have to want to be able to want a boundary.
True.
Yeah.
And the respect, that ability to value your opinion, to understand that your boundary is what you feel comfortable with. And he either had to get with the program or set up another boundary.
Right. Absolutely. Communication is so key. And it took me personally a really long time to be able to communicate that in an effective way. When you're coming out of a situation like that, it's like, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma. So like, how do I communicate this in a way that is, one, respecting myself and also respecting him? We may not have mingled and been able to work as a couple, but we're still parents. We're still in a situation where we have to raise our children. So like, we got to figure this out. Like we're going to have to, and communicate. And God, it took me so long to communicate with him. And sometimes I'm still just like, you little, like, like it just makes my skin crawl. But it saved our ability to be co-parents. It really seriously did.
Definitely.
And I always encourage that, for people that I talk to that are going through the same situation, whatever they feel is right. And if they choose to go that route, it's possible. Boundaries make those kind of situations possible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you take our example. We had DV, substance abuse, and a couple of hurdles in between us, not even with us, in between us, to where we both had to sit down and talk about healthy boundaries and communication. And she expressed herself in a way that I could understand. So I did the same thing. I reciprocated. I gave the same feedback, but in a positive way. Because if you go into the toxicity mode of all of that, building boundaries on toxicity, oh, well, you did this, you did that.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a positivity bubble.
Right. It causes more trauma.
More trauma for both parties, because at the end of the day, I know it's me and her, but then you got to think about the rugrats, the babies,
Right. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, child's development, they even have boundaries. You may not see it because they don't vocalize it depending on the age, but they have their own boundaries. It's just that I think that communication piece that brings it all together, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And thank you, Erin, for sharing that story, because that shows such resilience and vulnerability on your part. And it's it really resides with us because it's something very similar to what we have gone through as a couple. And the trauma will always be there. It's not something that you go to sleep one night and you wake up and you're trauma free. It's something where boundaries play a role every day to not cross. And that falls in line with those healthy boundaries, because you have to, compromise your values with each other, and realize, okay, that for this person, vocalizing and coming at this person this way makes him feel more physically threatened, or and basically when that happens, they crawl up in their shells, and then boundaries have been shattered,
right?
So that true line of boundary is it starts with, I think, key to this is communication.
And mutuality. Don't forget about mutuality.
Oh yeah, that is
Ooh,
the
yeah.
point.
Mutuality.
Yeah, that's very important.
Even
Yeah, see, I'm sure that how has that been like, well, I don't know how to ask that, but I'm sure that for you guys being that mutuality has been huge for you both, you know, and coming out of that.
Oh,
I
it was
think
a major.
Not
It
say
will-
like, oh, you did this more than I did that, or you know, because you can get really lost in that thought, like, oh, this person did more to me than I did to them, so then that makes you feel lesser or bigger, but it's toxic.
it is toxic, but it's also petty.
It
When you
is.
start micromanaging and nitpicking at each other, that's where it just starts going into a spiral that isn't going to be beneficial for anyone at the end of the
Right,
day.
right.
And it's not something that you can build overnight, but it's something that you could work towards.
Yeah.
That healthy boundary piece. That's why I keep referring back and forth to healthy, toxic, even that piece where the mutuality is like a little bit over here, a little bit over there, and you're like, something's got to give at the end of the day. And if neither one wants to understand, comprehend, be mindful of someone's boundary, then that's where kind of like that bubble we talked about just pops.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it turns into a downward spiral. That's why it's always good to be mindful. And words also. The way you word your boundaries is definitely going to be something that's going to be detrimental to somebody understanding what your needs are, because that's basically what a boundary is: your needs, your wants, and your respect. And that's basically what you want from the other person, and you're willing to give that too.
Right. And perception is everything too, because how I say something, you might not be able to perceive. And me and the father of my children had a hard time with that. Even when I would try to set a boundary, the way that I would go about it he wasn't able to receive it in the right way. And so I can totally relate to that.
And let me guess, it ended up with an argument, right?
Oh yeah.
And instead, this is what I did for myself, so I can break those labels, all those things that people want to say about men that do commit DV, domestic violence. I kind of rewired myself to understand boundaries. Once I started understanding boundaries, I did more research into mutuality. Once I did the mutuality piece, that's when I came down to a sit down. And if I don't understand what my wife is saying, instead of getting mad, instead of getting aggressive, two choices. I either step back, collect myself, and ask why, right? Or back then, it would have been toxicity.
Totally off the table. We weren't even going to talk about it.
Exactly.
At that point, you're not even talking. You're just spewing, and it's just like it's coming from that good place that it was coming from in the beginning is no longer there, and it's just like, I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even when she came in at me in a positive way, and I didn't understand, kind of like my wires getting crossed. I let my wires get crossed, but now it's more like, okay, let me step back, let me take a breather, let me try to understand from her point of perspective, or anyone now. I've kind of gotten to that I'm not an expert at boundaries yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you know how it goes. Recovery is not an instant thing. It's a lifelong process.
It is.
So that kind of leads me into something else I want to discuss. What boundaries have you set after your recovery that you find healthy, that work for you?
I have to do well. Let's think about that for a second. Yeah, I mean, it's still.
Want to chime in while Miss Erin's racking her brain? I know. I know it's been a long day. We do work to the bone. We do love what we do. So
we do, yeah, for sure.
So I mean, can you repeat that question.
What boundaries after your recovery, have you said that you find the most healthy, that helps, basically benefit your recovery the most?
What benefits my recovery the most? My
And
boundaries?
as far as boundaries, yeah.
I think in the beginning it was panic. Those panic boundaries. I ain't messing with you. I ain't dealing with you. I ain't dealing with nobody else. I just need to be by myself and do me. I got to get the knowledge. I got to get my power back so I can go ahead to be the best that I can be. And then in the middle of that, it was more or less like, I'm starting to figure this out. Let's work out on our boundaries. Everyone, at least immediate family and close friends. And then at the end, I started thinking more about other people's boundaries because I already have mine in place unless I have to set new ones. So my most beneficial boundary is someone else's boundary. After,
The initial, I gotcha.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was you more or less asking what my personal wants and needs were. Because I know when you're in an active DV relationship, it can sometimes or always, seem one-sided, with the person that's committing the DV. And, me being able to communicate with you after everything was said and done, and communicating, how I felt after the DV occurred, and, what I wanted from you to show me that, you had your boundaries in place. And I can't not say that, in the beginning, when we were forming these boundaries, that I didn't test his to see, how far can I manipulate him? How far can I, bend until he breaks? I just wanted to see his, I guess, pinnacle point to where, and that, I guess, was, my rigid boundaries hopping back up, the thought of feeling rejected and, feeling that, nothing's permanent, but knowing that, he had a set standard of who he wanted to be and how he wanted to, the
person I wanted to become.
Yeah. You almost kind of forget who that old person was in, active addiction. And you really start living by these boundaries you set up for yourself. What was it like for you, Erin, when you had these boundaries that you felt helped you the best, when it's set, basically when it came down to your relationship with your children's father, as far as, making sure these are set boundaries for you?
Yeah. So him and our relationship ended in 2016. And at that point in time, I really I did not address any of that trauma. I completely swept it, or attempted to sweep it under the rug, and just kind of ignored that had really ever happened. And that was how I really led more in depth into my substance use. And so I didn't actually begin to think about this kind of stuff until I got sober the first time, which was just a couple years ago. But I wanted to say just a couple of the boundaries that I had to really put into place in that situation, and then also in my recovery, was just knowing how to stand firm. If there was something that I felt very strongly about and that was important to me, I was not going to let that falter. I was going to stand firm with that. And I had a really hard time doing that. When you're in an abusive relationship, it's you lose power, and you feel like you're not in control, and what you might have stood firm for in other situations, you feel like you maybe can't there. So for me, being able to stand firm in what I believe and what I know and what I want was my first big boundary. And that was hard because in early recovery, I had no idea what I really wanted to do other than just not be on drugs, right? So I was like, how am I really going to stand firm when I feel like I don't really know myself? And I think that's natural. I think it happens to all of us in the beginning. We might have an idea of like, hey, I want to have a healthy relationship with my children. I want to heal from my trauma, but like, how am I going to do that? And so I had to just stand firm on the thought that I want to be better. I want to be better. Whatever that looks like, whatever happens during that time of getting to that point, that's my boundary. If I feel like something in my life is not going to make me better, then I'm going to have to I'm not crossing that line anymore because I want to feel good. I want to be better. And then just being myself, not losing myself in other people. I am the first person to lose myself in someone else. And that's why I'm not dating, and I have not been dating since I've been in recovery, because I'll be like so confident in who I am and what I want to do. But, after going through so many years of codependency and having trauma bonds with my abuser, my idea of being in a relationship just doesn't look like I want it to yet. So I have to be me, and I have to be myself, unapologetically myself, whatever that's like. And then always paying attention to my mental health because, and checking in with myself on the regular, being aware of these thoughts that I'm having or what's going on in me and around me. And how it's really affecting me as a mother, as, an employee, as a sister, as a daughter, like as a friend, or just as me and my own thought when I'm laying down at night and I'm consumed by all of these things that are happening and whatever. That's just a really healthy boundary for me. Amanda just poked her head here. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
No, that was great. I liked how you said trauma bond. I really resonate with that because I still feel like Izzy and I do share, that trauma bond. And I know for the longest time it took us all of our power and all of our strength to actually break those ties that we tied ourselves to, that, oh, this is a traumatic relationship. There's all these pent up emotional feelings that we have towards each other, blame. And I think, with boundaries we set up, we're not going to look at each other like, oh, this person did this or that person did that. Yeah. It's, we have to meet in the middle here and, forgive ourselves first, and then, forgiving each other. Yeah. I don't feel like we could have built up any healthy boundaries if we didn't, display that apologetic. So I kind of want to move out of the recovery side of it, and what we've had to go through and endure to actually become, or are still working on, because we can't say we're perfectionists at this yet. But the things we've done continued from our recovery to gain that healthy boundary with, for example, our families. So I just wanted to chime in with our viewers. Ms. Zelda said, I had to set boundaries in my work as a peer specialist. Keeping a healthy relationship was important for both myself and the people I served. It was hard. It still is, but is about self-care and learning together how to establish a healthy relationship. Saying no is also hard, but it exposes our boundaries to others. All of this with love. Exactly. I think I
love that. It is, and she's right. It is hard. But it is important because keeping a healthy relationship, like she said, is important for not only us, but for the people we're serving, because
exactly.
Yeah. Love that.
I totally agree. She has my heart on that one. So now that we're out of our active recovery, and we're basically in after recovery and just trying to maintain our sobriety. How do both of you deal with people in your family who might not quite understand what you're going through personally because they haven't had that active addiction, that repeatedly say violate those boundaries that you have set in place?
Yeah, so I've experienced that. A lot of people in my family did not really understand my unwellness, and like, how could I have done what I've done, or how could I have walked away from my children, or you know, on and on. And the best thing that I can really do, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I can't really be angry with them because they don't understand, because in reality, like, it's kind of good that they don't really know. But when it comes to my boundaries, I have to make sure it goes back to that communication. Telling them and letting them into that part of me, and being able to speak about it in a way that shows where I went, where I was, and what I did to get better, and where I am now, and laying that out for them and helping them to really see it through my eyes. Like, because that was really difficult for me with some members of my family. For sure. It's difficult even with my children, because they are confused and don't really understand what was happening then, and working through that. But for the most part, as long as I communicate with them that these are where my lines are, like, this is where these kinds of situations could compromise, these kinds of words could compromise my recovery and my mental health. And this is why. Because at one point in time, I would have told you that, yes, I was just a junkie on the streets, not a mom. But now I have found the other side of that. And so I would appreciate it if you would not relate to, or, like, call me in that old Erin. And just having open communication, and just being transparent, as much transparent as I can be. And then just, standing firm in that, standing firm in my recovery, and standing firm in the work that I've put in,
Right.
Definitely. And, for me, the communication piece is a start, definitely. But then you have the troubling family members, the ones, the non-believers, in other words, the non-believers. And once again, that's where I kind of took my boundaries and my strategies into effect. If you don't want to understand me, you don't want to stay in my bubble, which is my boundary, you don't want to understand that I'm a changed person, then how about this? Let me step away for a bit. Let me put some actions behind the words. And then if you accept me on the second round, then I guess it was meant to be, And because, like, for a while, family and even my children were kind of distant because they didn't understand. They just knew DV, alcohol, drug use, all that stuff. But what they didn't put into place was, okay, just like a turtle, or what sheds its
snake.
A snake.
Yeah.
Nah, that's bad. Snake is bad. What other animals shed their skin? A tarantula, a spider, something that sheds
like a butterfly.
Yeah, butterfly. There you go. I went into my cocoon and I came back out, and came out better than ever, honestly. Yeah. And that's kind of how I went into it. Communication didn't work. Withdrew just to come back 10 times better with action, and letting them know my boundaries still stayed the same from the last time we had a conversation. They haven't changed. The only thing that has changed is that I'm able to show you. Instead of telling you, I'm showing you.
Right.
And that's how I've saved my relationship with my family.
Yeah, and I think also when we're, talking about violating boundaries, I feel like since we've reconnected with our children, since they've come back into our lives, I feel like because, when we were in active addiction, we didn't set boundaries with our children. So now we're kind of having to train our children what actual healthy boundaries are. I know they tested our patience a little bit when they came back home and all came back together, because they, I guess, couldn't comprehend old mom and dad and how old mom and dad ran their ship compared to mom and dad who are now healthy, who are now communicating with them, who are now setting up those healthy boundaries. So for me, when it comes to my children, I have to always, reiterate with them, that was old mommy and daddy. We, made mistakes in our past, but these are the things that I feel are, good for you and me, and kind of rekindling that healthy relationship we need to have with our children, to raise them in good graces, because I know most parents could agree with me on this, that we always strive for our children to want more, to want better for themselves, and to not become complacent in life. We always want them to reach for whatever, their hopes and dreams are. And that's, I think, the one thing that we're still struggling with is, our children trying to really, violate our boundaries that we have really set in place, especially with our teenagers.
It's more or less staying stern and steady and on course with what you...
And consistent. Just very consistent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So
test my patience and waters all the time, but it's new when they come back. It's that's just that rekindle. You got to do it. Communicate. For sure.
And I know Izzy's got to sign off. He's got some training to get to. So we're just going to have a little chit chat between me and Aaron for a few.
Cool. Ladies to y'all. And they're lovely, everybody. I hope y'all know. Lovely people.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys have a good day.
You too.
So I kind of wanted to move in. What are certain boundaries you have set with your two sons? I know they're a little bit younger, not too young, but more than confident, of understanding, your aspect of things. So what have you done to, make it easier for them to understand, how you set up boundaries in your recovery with them?
So really just, oh, hey, Demetra. Sorry, she just commented. That's my girl. So really, like, what I've found with my children especially is, a good healthy boundary is just making sure that they feel safe. Because coming out of how things were before and then how things are now, that was a huge problem, was their safety and security. So what I've noticed is that as long as I am, encouraging the idea of being safe, that leaves room for my children to open up to me more, and become more confident and trustworthy in me. And they're little people and they're growing into their little selves, and they're getting these little personalities. And I swear they're like 7 going on 17. My oldest is. But like he communicates better with me when he feels secure, for sure. My youngest, he's still going through some things and we're still adjusting to that with him. But my oldest, most importantly, is just that feeling of security and consistency allows them to really understand what their boundaries are, and then be able to understand what my boundaries are. But like, as far as being open and honest with them, like that, I think is really important. I'll always preach that, even though they're young, just letting them know, like not being afraid to speak on that, and just let them know, hey, yeah, there was about a time when this was going on, and there was a time when things were like that. But look how things are now. Let's work. How can I make things more easier, or more like, I don't know, better for you and make you feel safer and more comfortable with mommy? Like, what kinds of things do you think mommy needs to work on? Because, you know, my son gets really triggered by like yelling. So, and we're all parents here. We know how it goes. Like, there's times where I'm just like, "Ugh," and I'll snap and I'll yell, and then I'll look in my kids' eyes and I'll know that it's still so new to them that might bring them back to a time where they feel like in my unwellness when I was actively using. And I have to be really conscious of that with them. And just knowing that there are still certain things that trigger, and they have these boundaries. They might not even know they're really boundaries, but they are, they're there. And I don't want to interfere with their healing by just something as simple as lashing out and yelling or making them not feel safe. So.
Yeah, and I know we could continue up on topic of boundaries all day, but I really want to help our viewers with the questions they have. And I think this one's geared right towards you, Miss Erin. So can you speak to the value of being single in early recovery?
Oh, yes. You know, like I said before, when I first got into recovery, I had no idea what I wanted. I knew that I didn't want to be on drugs. I knew that I wanted to feel better, but how that was going to happen or what I was going to have to do in order for that to happen, I really had no idea. And so there was like a little bit of insecurity, and I wasn't very confident in myself yet. And I do think that the statement, you know, you can't really love another person until you love yourself is really important. Because when you don't feel secure and confident in yourself, you can't really expect mutuality and respect and stuff that really is important in a relationship, as well as communication. You know, not really being secure in what I want, I can't really communicate that way to another person. So I think there is a lot of value in being single in recovery. I think it gives you a lot of time to just be with yourself and to figure yourself out and to really like dig deep into some thoughts and feelings that you may have been hiding for a long time with substances, and healing, you know, reclaiming you. And, you know, like I said also before, I'm a kind of person, I'll get really attached to people and that codependency issue, and that just ruins relationships because I become so available to another person that I disconnect from myself. And in early recovery, I mean, we're really working on just reconnecting with ourselves. So I can't be in a relationship and lose that focus. And so, yeah, like being alone and just spending time with yourself and knowing, you know, who you are and what you want is just really important. Because I used to never be able to be alone. I did not want to be alone, whether it was in a relationship or with friends, or, you know, I put myself in a lot of situations that were awful for me just because I didn't want to sit with myself. And sitting with ourselves in those moments is really important in early recovery. So yeah, and it's been tremendous for me. My independence, my confidence has, you know, improved by just being single and just being with myself, you know, and knowing now I know what I really want. So now I can stand firm and I can do my mental health check-ins and I can love myself first above all else.
I love the way you worded that, though.
Thank you.
You know, trying to make that inner peace with yourself, because I know that was a big struggle of mine because of the vast, you know, size of my family and also having a partner. You know, it's always been, what can I do for them? What can I do to help them? But at the end of the day, I needed to sit with myself and make inner peace with myself. So I totally am right there with you on that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm reading one that says, I am ashamed to open up to my 14-year-old. I feel like I'm a pro at answering to this.
Yeah, that's all you.
Year-old. During my recovery, my daughter was 12, 13 years old when I started my active addiction. And she lived through the nightmare that was just that, my addiction. And I was always ashamed after my recovery on how to actually, explore my feelings with her and how she felt about, living with that daily. And I still to this day struggle with it, but, we all are going to keep going around to this communication piece is, having your daughter open up, or your son, whoever it may be, opening up how that made them feel at the time, kind of resonating with them so that they are more willing to have that open line of communication towards you. Because I know once my daughter came back from DSS custody, she was really resentful that I let our situation get to the point where she needed to be taken out of the home, placed in a stranger's care. And, she was really, it made her way more closed off, made her spiteful, made her, resilient to anything. So that whole line of communication had to really open up. And it set a boundary for myself to not lead her into an adult's place also.
Right.
Because she was having to be an adult at that time, because mom was passed out drunk or mom was doing drugs. And, she had to also take over that caretaker role. So now that, I'm in that phase of my life, I really try to not put any of my roles. And that's one firm boundary I hold with my teenagers. I don't put them in an adult spot anymore. I don't, talk about money. I don't talk about anything like that with them. I keep them in the child's place, which I didn't do before. But we're getting towards the end. I know we could all day about boundaries.
I know. We really could. I have loved this conversation so much. I really have.
And I appreciate you coming on with me. I miss you so much, not being with the community health workers, but I know you're doing amazing things in recovery court, and I know you're going to rock it out and make it the best it can be.
I love you, Karen.
But I'm going to, quote one of my famous coworkers again. I love this line that he uses. So as we drive the airplane in the hangar,
he'd be so proud of us.
Favorite thing. That's the one thing I'm going to always remember. I'm going to go ahead and let everybody know about the Warm Line. You can catch me and Aaron once in a while on the Warm Line. It's pretty confidential 24/7. The number is 1-833-390-7728. You'll talk with lovely people like us that want to help you, and we want to be there for you. So feel free, like I said, 24/7. It's confidential. Anything you would like to add, Miss Erin, to end our little Thursday together?
Yeah, so PRN, we are here at 2224 The Plaza in Charlotte, and we have our doors open. We have peer support here Monday through Friday between like 8 and 4:30. We are here to meet with you, and we have classes that are in person also. I think they're like 11, 12, and 1, maybe something like that. But anyways, come by, come see us. If you want to just chat, if you want to meet some of us and just kind of talk about whatever, like we're here for you, and we would love to have you here and meet with you and show you about recovery and wellness and just all the great stuff that we have here. So yeah, come see us. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, and I so loved having you, and I hope to have you on again soon. But everybody, I hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday. Please like and share to anyone that you think could benefit from our conversation today. But that is all for today, Miss Erin. Much
Thank you.
love.
Love
Thank
you.
you so much. And you guys have a happy Thursday. We'll see you next Thursday at 1 p.m.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.